Good evening and welcome to our reflections on Thursday the 25th of June. I want to continue looking at the themes of discipleship, but turn to a part of discipleship which perhaps we don't look at enough or don't want to look at, and that's suffering and sacrifice. It may not sound like a jolly kind of heading for our reflections this evening, but bear with me. It was Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the great Christian theologian, who himself suffered so much, but suffered with what could be said fortitude, or might be described as others as extreme grace. It was Bonhoeffer who said, "When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die." When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. Again, that doesn't sound really very jolly or something most people would want to accept. But for many, the sacrificial following of Jesus leads them to or through dark and dangerous places. And in Jesus' ministry, he never hides this in anything he teaches or says. There will be struggles, there will be challenges, he teaches. Alongside our adventure with Jesus, all of this is part of that adventure. This is what he also said, life in all its fullness. Not life in some of its fullness, not just the good bits, life in all its fullness. And we can find joy and contentment in all things. We can be thankful in all things. We can be happy for the blessings we have, even when that involves sacrifice or, as I've said, suffering. And I want to bring you a couple of examples of suffering this evening. One is of a church where I was minister in Stafford some years ago. Trinity Church in the centre of the town of Stafford went through a process of leaving and of letting go over many years. It's something that it would be fair to say a lot of churches aren't good at, but Trinity kind of nailed its colours to the mast when it came to leaving and letting go. And in the foyer, the main foyer of the entrance to the church, there's a great plaque on the wall, and I want to read to you what that plaque says. Trinity Church is a coming together of three branches of the Christian church in the town centre of Stafford. The Congregational Church in Martin Street was sold to the County Council office for extensions and replacements, and a church building was then opened in Eastgate Street in May 1966. The people of the Presbyterian Church in Mount Street, as part of the United Reformed Church, joined with those at Eastgate Street in January 1982. Wesley Methodist Church in Chapel Street was sold to Standard Life Assurance Company for redevelopment. In a symbolic act of union, the people of the three denominations joined in a last act of worship at Wesley Church in September 1984 and together walked to the Eastgate Street Church. The Congregational Witness in Stafford dates from 1786, the Methodist from 1779, and the Presbyterian from 1662. The Presbyterian Church, which incorporated the structure of their 1689 chapel, one of the earliest Presbyterian meeting houses in the county, stood on this site and was demolished to make way for this Trinity Church building, opened in November 1988. In its turn, the Eastgate Street Church too was sold. And at the very bottom of that plaque is this quote from John chapter 12, verse 24. "Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit." Sacrifice is part of discipleship. Laying down, leaving and letting go was all part of that discipleship process for the members of those three churches that came together to make Trinity Church in the heart of Stafford over that long period of time. I want to stay with Stafford, and Andrew Roberts, in his book Holy Habits, mentions somebody who was also a colleague and friend of mine in Stafford. In fact, he was, while I was there, during the last years I was there, the Methodist superintendent. And then a couple of years after that, he sadly died. A wonderfully talented man and minister. But I want to read to you what Andrew Roberts wrote about Jeff Reynolds. He says, Jeff Reynolds was an extraordinary man. The son of a boxer, he never even entered a church or thought of Jesus until he was in his 20s. To his astonishment, having embarked on the adventure of discipleship, he ended up getting ordained. Alongside his regular ministerial duties, this down-to-earth holy bloke was chaplain to a football club and a prison, where he learned helpful skills like how to break into your car when you lock the keys inside. He captained an Anglican diocesan cricket team, which, as a Methodist, gave him particular pleasure, allowing him to order 2 bishops around, moving them diagonally, of course, and he played in a band, the Smiling Strangers, for which he wrote many songs. One of his finest is called Covenant, and is based on the covenant prayer of discipleship written by John Wesley. In the song and in the spirit of the covenant, Jeff explains how he is willing to be put to suffering and even to shame. And the quote from the song reads, "As long as you're there with me, as long as you're there with me." Jeff lived his discipleship in the light of that relationship. It sustained him in all he was and did, and in his dying at cruelly the age of just 53. Jeff really was a great bloke, and I still grieve his loss, as do, I'm sure, many. Jeff was minister at another church in Stafford, where I went on to succeed him just for a few years as part of my ministry in that town. But those words, "as long as you're there with me," says a lot about how we can sustain ourselves through times of suffering and through times of sacrifice. In the Gospel of Matthew, we read Jesus' own words about what he teaches the disciples in Matthew 16 on the subject of self-denial, and here he points them towards the cross. So in chapter 16 of Matthew's Gospel, beginning at verse 24, "Then Jesus told his disciples, 'If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life?'" Our calling to follow Christ may well involve suffering. But as Jeff said, as long as you're there with me, we can get through this. But those times of sacrificial calling also involve transformation. As we make that transition from our selfish human nature towards holiness, to accepting and living life in all its fullness, as I said a few moments ago. And in our membership promise, as part of our membership promise in the United Reformed Church, we promise this in these words. We're asked, "Do you accept the gift and the cost of following Christ in your daily life and work?" And those who come into membership respond, "I do, with God's help." Not I do on my own, I do with God's help. Again, we come back to that quote from Jeff's song, as long as you're there with me. We can embrace discipleship in all its fullness, knowing that God goes with us every step of the way. I want to pray today using a prayer from the Methodist Worship Book, which is part of the current Covenant service, and it is one of my favourite prayers. So let us pray. I am no longer my own, but yours. Your will, not mine, be done in all things. Wherever you may place me, in all that I do, and in all that I may endure, when there is work for me, and when there is none, when I am troubled, and when I am at peace. Your will be done when I am valued and when I am disregarded, when I find fulfillment and when it is lacking, when I have all things and when I have nothing. I willingly offer all I have and am to serve you as and where you choose. Glorious and blessed God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, you are mine and I am yours. May it be so forever. Let this covenant, now made on earth, be fulfilled in heaven. Amen. Amen. And thank you for watching.